Hello, history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. For centuries, the fear of witchcraft gripped communities worldwide, leading to a dark legacy of brutal punishments against those accused of sorcery. From medieval Europe to early America, witchcraft trials were often based on suspicion and superstition rather than evidence, giving rise to some of history's most infamous and horrific punishments. The witch hunts. Witch hunts were not just about capturing and punishing alleged witches. They were massive efforts fueled by fear, suspicion, and religious authority that spread terror across entire societies. From the 15th to the 18th centuries, witch hunts swept across Europe, with the most infamous trials taking place in places like Salem, Massachusetts, and various regions of France, Germany, and Scotland. Many religious and political leaders encouraged these hunts, using them as a way to maintain control, justify their authority, or channel public fear toward a common enemy. The smallest suspicion or rumor could spark an investigation, and even an innocent action, like healing with herbs or having a birthmark, could be enough to accuse someone of witchcraft. Once accused, individuals faced brutal trials with little hope of proving their innocence. Often, the accused were denied legal representation and subjected to tests designed to prove their guilt rather than their innocence. In some areas, the infamous swimming test was used. Suspects were thrown into a body of water with their hands and feet bound. If they floated, it was taken as proof of guilt, supposedly showing that the water had rejected them. If they sank, they were considered innocent, but often drowned. These trials were not only about catching witches, they were also used as a terrifying example to remind others of the supposed dangers of witchcraft and to dissuade dissenters from opposing authority. The witch's chair. The witch's chair was one of the most excruciating forms of torture and was used to force confessions from suspected witches. First appearing in Germany, this torture device soon spread to other parts of Europe. The witch's chair was an iron chair covered with sharp spikes on every possible surface, from the seat to the backrest, armrests, and even the footrests. Once the accused was strapped tightly to the chair, the spikes would press deeply into their skin, causing severe pain. Often, interrogators would press down on the suspect to intensify the pain, insisting they confess. In some cases, the chair was heated, causing excruciating burns to the victim's body as they sat helplessly bound. The idea behind this torture was that a real witch would not feel pain if they were truly guilty, a belief rooted in superstition. Therefore, the cries of the accused were seen not as proof of innocence, but as evidence of guilt. This punishment served a dual purpose: extracting confessions and terrifying others in the community. The sight of someone writhing in agony on the witch's chair was a powerful message to the public about the consequences of associating with dark forces. Those who survived the torture were often permanently scarred, both physically and psychologically, and many were sentenced to death afterward, regardless of whether they confessed. Burning at the stake. Burning at the stake is perhaps the most infamous punishment associated with accused witches. This method of execution was based on the belief that fire could cleanse the soul and prevent any evil force from using the body again. Burning was most commonly practiced in countries like France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire, where religious authorities saw it as an act of purification. People believed that by burning the body, they were freeing the soul from its connection to the devil and making sure no demonic forces could inhabit it. Although burning was common in many parts of Europe, some regions had variations. In England, for example, hanging was the typical punishment for witchcraft, as burning was generally reserved for petty treason or offenses against the king. Scotland, however, preferred burning, which was a more fear-inducing punishment. The horrific ordeal was often carried out in public, where large crowds would gather to witness the event. People would watch as the accused was tied to a wooden stake and surrounded by kindling or other flammable materials. French philosopher Michel de Montaigne criticized the practice, pointing out the cruelty and absurdity of killing people based on little more than suspicion or fear. The psychological impact on the community was profound. Public burnings served as both entertainment and a stark warning. The agonizing cries of the accused would echo through the crowds, further instilling a fear of witchcraft and reinforcing the power of the religious and legal authorities. The witch's bridle. The witch's bridle, also known as the scold's bridle, or branks, was a device used to silence, punish, and publicly humiliate those accused of witchcraft. Made of iron, it was designed as a mask or cage that fitted over the accused's head, with a spiked metal plate inside the mouth that pressed against the tongue or the roof of the mouth. Any attempt to speak would cause severe pain, and some bridles even had a bell attached to alert others when the accused was nearby. This punishment was not only used for accused witches, but also for women who were seen as gossipers or scolds, hence the name Scold's Bridle. Authorities used the bridle to control those who they deemed disruptive or outspoken. In the case of alleged witches, the bridle was a way to keep them from casting spells or cursing others. Wearing this device was a form of public shaming, as the accused would often be paraded through the streets with the bridle on, drawing attention to their supposed crime and marking them as outcasts. Some versions of the bridle included additional tortures, such as spikes that would pierce the cheeks or throat if the wearer attempted to move their tongue. Those forced to wear the bridle often suffered severe injuries and psychological trauma, as the device caused them intense pain and restricted their ability to eat or drink. The fear inspired by the witch's bridle was enough to keep many quiet, reinforcing social obedience and the community's fear of witchcraft. Hanging execution. Hanging was a common form of punishment for those accused of witchcraft, especially in England and colonial America. It was considered somewhat less gruesome than burning at the stake, but it was still a terrible way to die. If the noose didn't snap the person's neck immediately, they would die slowly by strangulation, which could take several minutes. This was incredibly painful, as the person struggled for breath while the crowd looked on. These executions were usually held in public spaces and attracted large gatherings. For many, watching the hanging of an accused witch became a twisted form of entertainment, as well as a stark reminder of the dangers of stepping outside social or religious norms. Respected individuals of the time, like Sir Thomas Browne, a well-known physician and author, strongly believed that witchcraft posed a real and present danger. Browne described witchcraft as a sinister force and argued that executing witches was necessary to protect the community. His opinions reflected the beliefs of many other authorities who supported the strict punishment of alleged witches, thinking this would help remove evil influences from society. During the height of the witch trials, hundreds of people were sentenced to hang, a testament to how deeply ingrained the fear of witchcraft had become. Public hangings served as both a chilling spectacle and a warning for all to follow strict moral and religious codes, or face a similar fate. Drowning, or the swimming test, was another cruel method used to test whether someone was a witch. In this so-called trial by ordeal, the accused was bound at the hands and feet and thrown into a body of water. People believed that water, symbolizing purity, would reject a witch, making them float, while an innocent person would sink. If the accused floated, they were seen as guilty, but if they sank, they were considered innocent. Tragically, this meant that those who proved their innocence by sinking often drowned before they could be pulled out, leading to many unnecessary deaths. Despite the cruelty of this practice, it was legally allowed in parts of Europe during the height of the witch trials. People saw it as a fair and effective way to reveal a person's guilt or innocence, even though it was based entirely on superstition rather than logic. Reginald Scott, an English historian, spoke out against the swimming test in his book, The Discovery of Witchcraft. Scott argued that these methods were unscientific and were rooted in fear and ignorance rather than real evidence. Nonetheless, many people at the time believed in the validity of such tests, viewing them as necessary to rid their communities of suspected witches. This method illustrates just how strong the hold of superstition was on society, and how little regard there was for the lives of those accused. The rack torture. The rack was one of the most feared instruments of torture in medieval Europe, commonly used during witch trials to force confessions from the accused. It was a large wooden frame with rollers on either side. The accused person's wrists and ankles were tied to the rollers, and as the rollers turned, their body would be stretched in opposite directions. This would often lead to the person's joints dislocating or their bones breaking. The pain was excruciating, and many people would confess to anything just to make it stop, whether they were guilty or not. Although the rack was used for many crimes, it became a notorious tool in witch trials, particularly in countries like France, Spain, and Italy, where the authorities were determined to root out witchcraft. The use of the rack demonstrated the lengths to which those in power would go to secure confessions and keep control over society. Under the extreme pain of the rack, most people would admit to any crime they were accused of, even if it meant confessing to witchcraft or other supernatural deeds they had not committed. Italian philosopher Cesare Beccaria later condemned such practices in his book On Crimes and Punishments, arguing for justice based on reason rather than cruelty. He believed that torture did not provide reliable confessions and only served to harm innocent people. The rack was more than just a tool for confession. It was a symbol of the control that authorities sought to exert over people's lives, sacrificing human dignity and truth for the sake of fear and superstition. The brutal punishments for those accused of witchcraft remind us of the dark depths humanity can reach when fear and superstition go unchecked. Methods like hanging, drowning, and the rack were not only devastatingly cruel, but also served as tools of social control, silencing those who dared to stand out or question the status quo. These practices are now relics of the past, but they serve as lasting lessons on the importance of justice, empathy, and reason. If you found this exploration into history insightful and want to learn more about its complex and haunting chapters, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll be the first to know when we dive into the next chapter of our fascinating past. Thank you for watching, and stay curious.